And hello, IMAA members. We're super excited to be here today to present the Spotify Podcast Masterclass. We absolutely love the indies. Love you too, Sam, and thank you for that excellent intro. We love the indies. We love the passion, the integrity that you represent. And so we hope that this session leaves you feeling very inspired and informed about Spotify podcast ads. So as Sam mentioned, this is the other Sam Moles, ANZ Head of Podcasts. I'm Kate Perry, or KP, Director of Sales across the indie and direct landscape, and we really hope you enjoy this session. So what are we going to cover today? We'll outline the podcast benefits for advertisers, supported with an immersive audio experience, otherwise known as closing your eyes. I'll hand over to Sam to explain how we're reinventing podcast advertising, and do pay extra attention in this section because we have a little quiz at the end. So take notes in Sam's part. We'll look at podcast creative and some best practice there. And as I mentioned, we'll finish off with a bit of a quiz with some great prizes and a very special guest. So let's crack on. The podcast advantage for brands. So what are the podcast advantages for brands? Well, we're living in a real audio renaissance right now. It is the golden age of audio. There's a couple of reasons for this. Technology, first of all, allowing us to listen in our cars, our homes through smart speakers, on our watches, even in our fridges, the Samsung fridge, which I think retails for around $11,000, allows Spotify integration in the fridge. And most commonly, of course, in the palm of your hand. And I guess audio really soundtracks our days when we're driving, when we're chilling out, sleeping, cooking, anything really. And Spotify has seized this opportunity with our Ubiquity Strategy. And essentially what that means is any piece of audio or any audio content that anybody wants to listen to kind of anywhere on any device, we will be there to help our users soundtrack their day. The renaissance is also due to just the absolute explosion of audio content. Everyone has a podcast. Hello, Alexis. I do love your 80s movie podcast that you have on Spotify. And audiobooks too, with our recent acquisition of audiobook company Findaway. But also discovery. So playlists like Discover Weekly, New Music Friday, this idea of discovery, both music and podcasts, allows users to find, content that we know that they will love. Our journey began 15 years ago, and we've really changed the way people consume music and audio content generally. We're very much not just a music streaming service anymore. We're really an audio platform. In Australia, we've got over 11 million monthly active users validated by Comscore. And we talk about our overall addressable audience now, not just our free users. And that's because brands can now reach our premium audience as well through podcast advertising. So a little mini quiz to kick things off. Hands up who knows the answer to this one. A, B, or C. Spotify now reaches 31% of Australians any given week, 22%, or 17%. Pop your answers into the chat. I can't see the chat, but maybe Sam or someone can tell me who answered correctly. I hope everybody said A.
Yes.
Excellent. It wouldn't be a sales presentation if we put C, would it? The answer is A. Spotify total addressable audience reaches 31% of Australians any given week. Nielsen recently conducted some research called The Mixer, which aimed to sort of explain where Spotify fits in the overall landscape, comparing Spotify's reach and engagement to radio, to TV, and other digital platforms. From the study, you can see our total addressable audience across both free and premium podcast listeners reaches 3 in 10 Aussie adults and more than 1 in 2 Gen Zs on Spotify. So we're really talking about this total addressable audience, which is super exciting and I guess the basis of our presentation today. You can see here that we compete amongst the top media channels in terms of scale, But what's important to call out is our incremental reach that we can deliver as well. So an average 22% incremental reach to radio, 23% incremental reach to TV in Australia, and 18% for digital. And this is why this research piece is called the Mixer, so that we can demonstrate how Spotify can complement existing campaigns and existing mediums. We rank as the top podcast platform for people 16 plus weekly. And we've got over 4 million monthly active listeners in Australia tuning into podcasts. It's a brand new audience for brands to tap into, which is super exciting. Our podcast audience continues to grow. Over 70% of podcast listeners are on premium. As I mentioned, an audience that we just haven't been able to allow brands to access in the past. So why are they growing? Like, what's going on? Discovery, as we mentioned, we've got, some pretty awesome algorithms, and this is why people love Spotify, because we serve them suggested content, music and podcasts that we know that they're going to love based on their existing listening. One barrier, I guess, with podcasts is just that there's sheer volume of, content available. Every man and his dog has a podcast or can have a podcast, and that's awesome, because we want all artists to be able to share their work, but it's also hard to navigate as a user, isn't it? Over 4 million podcasts on Spotify alone, so it can be really overwhelming. So we're glad that we're able to offer our algorithms to help guide people based on their existing tastes. And content, we're investing in some amazing world-class content that I'll talk about in a minute. And in a minute is right now. There's been just this huge explosion of really awesome podcast content on Spotify. We've partnered with DC Comics to launch Batman Unburied, which has been charting #1 since it launched. When did it launch? About a month or so ago?
May.
Okay. And that is a bit of a cheeky and affordable way to access the DC comic universe as well, through Spotify, of course. Locally, we have the Inspired Unemployed. Does anybody love these boys? I think they are so hilarious. They were basically TikTokers that went crazy on TikTok. We turned them into a podcast, and they've just gone from strength to strength. So these guys are doing really, really well. We've taken the same approach with Millie Ford, who is a TikToker, and we've created a podcast with her called Out of Character with Millie. And old Millie might be making a little feature, an appearance in this presentation later on. We've also got some exciting content slated to launch in H2, including the Duke and Duchess of Sussex via their Archwell Audio company that they launched. So Meg's, lover or hater, she draws a massive crowd, and we are really excited to launch her podcast called Archetypes. Essentially, this is a powerful podcast featuring 12 inspiring episodes and 12 iconic women investigating the labels, the stereotypes that are applied to women. Megan, I shouldn't call her Meg. She's not my best friend, but she would be if we met. She hosts and she meets with these women to amplify their voices. So a really awesome show. If anybody would like to talk more, get in touch with me after the prezzo. We've also got an 8-part series coming up called The System, which features veteran true crime producer Laurie Rothschild and Saldi and Kim Kardashian, who in her own legal studies has become a real advocate for criminal justice reform. This is going to be really interesting, I reckon, Sam. Laurie and Kimmy K are teaming up to dive into the story of Kevin Keith, a man, not sure if anyone's familiar with this case, a man convicted of a triple homicide in which there is no evidence and he had multiple alibis. So we really deep dive into this case and what really happened, how the criminal justice system in the US is like basically broken, and the fight to get Kevin a new trial and hopefully his freedom. He's been behind bars for 25 years. Most of that spent on death row. So that one I'm really looking forward to. We've also just signed up as an exclusive Tony and Ryan. These guys are Melbourne-based and they have a huge following, both locally and globally, and they basically talk about everything and anything. They've described their podcast as hot, fun garbage. Awesome. And as the World Cup approaches, this is exciting. We have 2 World Cup podcasts being launched, and we'll have some more package details to come on those. The first is 22 Goals, which looks at the most iconic goals ever scored in the World Cup. And that one is going to be a real tearjerker, I reckon. And then the other podcast is called We Came to Win, which celebrates the World Cup history, a bit of behind the scenes. So yeah, for any advertisers that might be keen on World Cup alignment, we've got you covered. So we've spoken about scale, we've spoken about engagement, some of our Ripper content. So why podcasts for your brands? We know that they're a hard to reach, valuable audience, a premium, unique audience that's really hard to find anywhere else, really. We know Aussies are coming to Spotify to actively select the podcast content they want to listen to, and therefore will give it their full attention. So podcasts, it's a leaned in, active listening session. Podcasts offer low clutter, which delivers cut through and enables your brand's voice to ensure it's heard, to be heard. All of which is why the format drives action for brands, and we'll delve into that a little bit more in a minute. So I guess everybody listens to podcasts. I'm not sure how long you've been listening to podcasts, but it is a relatively new medium for advertisers. The landscape is pretty cluttered. And so we wanted to demonstrate how it works. And we thought, what better way to do it than through the power of audio? We've created a little day in the life of a podcast listener to demonstrate, how people interact with podcasts throughout the day and engage with brand messaging. So if I could ask everybody to just take a moment, close your eyes, have a nice deep breath, switch on your ears, and let's hear from Mark from marketing. But first, I'm just going to mute myself.
Five more minutes. Great idea, Mark. Set 2 alarms. What day is it again? Tuesday. Work from the office day. But first, coffee. Wakey, wakey, brain. This sounds like an interesting update from the Wall Street Journal. Get that one ready for the car. Wait, is that the time? Hey Siri, play Wsj News Podcast on Spotify.
Wsj News Podcast now playing.
In February 2021, people all over Australia discovered that thousands of Facebook pages had gone dark. Most of the black pages belonged to news organizations. Suddenly, Australians couldn't access content on Facebook from news sites like the Wall Street Journal. That's after the break.
This episode is brought to you by Ford Puma. However, this episode could be brought to you in a Ford Puma as you drive down a long road with the sun shining in the distance and enjoy the last few moments of this story you're being told all through the sweet sounds of the B&O speakers. Yes, we think that would be nice too. Next time you listen to a podcast, do it in a Ford Puma when you take it for a test drive. Visit ford.com.au and book yours today. T's and C's apply.
Doesn't sound great. Maybe I should test drive one of those Ford Pumas.
Well, if it isn't Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch.
How you going, Carly? Busy day today?
Basically, back-to-back meetings. What I wouldn't give for a karaoke machine and a few shots.
Well, I'd join you, but I have a rule about singing before 10 a.m.
Very funny. Speaking of lols, did you listen to the latest Inspired Unemployed app? They're hilarious, those boys. Oh, is that the time? Better get ready for my marathon of meetings.
Godspeed. Well, that's an annoying email. Oh, I might throw in an episode while I crunch these numbers. time to bring out my biggest do not disturb headphones.
Okay, so you're going to give us the terminology.
I'll
okay?
give you the word, and I want you to tell me what you think it is.
Let's try. Let's see how we go then. All right.
Okay, what about zombied?
So you're talking to someone and they ghost you, but then they come back from the dead.
And ghost you again.
Oh shit!
Being ghosted twice
Oh
by
wow.
the same person.
This episode is brought to you by Booty.
You know what we don't talk enough about on this podcast, Fax? Undies.
You're not wrong, mate. Well, here's some good news. Booty don't just make undies that keep you feeling good. They make undies that keep the whole planet feeling good.
That's right. They make sustainably produced underwear that's comfy for you and the planet too.
Booty, official underwear of the entire planet.
Learn more at booty.com.au.
Zombied, huh? The double ghosting. Ooh, that reminds me, I should check my Bumble. See if I've got any bites.
You're on mute.
Here we go. They were the inspired unemployed boys doing the booty undies there. Love it. So some key takeaways in terms of the podcast advantages. There's now scale with a premium hard to reach audience, more content for brands to leverage and align to. We know that podcasts are an engaging medium that performs strongly with attention metrics, an active leaned in medium. And lastly, they drive action for your clients, which is the perfect segue into the next section where I hand over to Sam.
Thanks, Kate. Hi, everyone. Hope you're all well. So what I'm here today to talk to you about is just about how Spotify is reinventing podcast advertising. I've been at Spotify for 6 months. Previous to that, I was working at a company called Wsj. We were an independent Australian startup that was acquired by Spotify at the end of last year. And coming on board, it's been very exciting for me to be able to see the work that Spotify has got underway in terms of developing products, formats, solutions for advertisers that really address some of the challenges that have been called out that hold back podcast advertising in this market. So to give you a look at what that looks like, this is effectively our end-to-end, ad ecosystem for podcasts. So this is effectively what we've been working on and developing and investing in so that advertisers can come to Spotify and buy these valuable audiences, which Kate's talked about, that are listening to podcasts. Calling out some key pillars here, listeners. So obviously listeners are incredibly important. Without them, we're not here talking to you guys today. The platforms aspect of it is very important because we've been able to acquire brands like Megaphone or platforms like Megaphone who are working on some really unique marketplace for brands type solutions, and I'll touch on what that's developed into in the next few slides. Content, so we've bought a few content businesses like The Ringer and Gimlet, and we've also done some licensing deals with some of the biggest podcasts in the world, the likes of Call It Daddy, Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard, and of course Joe Rogan. And then monetization, so Spotify advertising, we've been working to create a couple of different ways that brands can buy podcast advertising, and the aim is to really simplify and make it as easy as possible for you guys to be able to do that. And I think that's really important, that part about making it as easy as possible. So this is from a survey that we did with the IMAA, and what are some of the main challenges, if you will. And you can see here that things like measurement and standardized metrics, scale, confusion around the landscape are all key points. And what we've been working on is developing solutions that we think address some of those challenges. The three most common ones that we've heard from agencies and advertisers in terms of the challenges that exist are, firstly, this idea of an inability to target audiences with precision at scale, limited insight and understanding of ad delivery and efficacy, which is basically how do I know someone actually listened to my ad, and if so, did they listen all the way through? And then this inability to click or engage with an ad. So someone's heard a really great podcast ad, and in the moment, they wanted to maybe be able to take action on that, but they haven't been able to because, you're listening to a podcast, you probably got your phone in your pocket. We've developed a solution called Call to Action Cards, which I'm going to introduce to you today, which is really exciting because it's actually speaking to how we could address that challenge. So looking at the Spotify Audience Network, Spotify Audience Network was basically developed to make sense of the fact that there is hundreds of millions of people listening to podcasts every month. There's millions of podcasts, which Kate touched on. The idea is the Spotify Audience Network seeks to make sense of all of that so that it's very easy for advertisers to buy audiences at scale across a range of podcasts. What this product looks like from an overview perspective, we've got some of our own podcasts that are part of the inventory pool, but we're also working with a really broad range of third-party publishers who have all opted in to be a part of the network. That opt-in piece is really important because it means that we've been able to vet them for brand safety. So any activity that runs across the Spotify Audience Network is brand safe. And what that inventory pool also has allowed us to do through working with our partner Nielsen is we've been able to introduce and now offer to advertisers the ability to buy audience segments. And these audience segments mean that your ads will run to people that are in these audience segments, but they'll be running across a really broad range of podcasts. But they're serving an ad to that listener in that moment because they are an SMB owner, or because we know they're a parent, or because we know they're a tech adopter, for example. So there's this really great menu of audience options we've got. And the great part about it is, of course, that how you would typically brief out a publisher, briefing out on these types of audiences your clients want to reach, we can match and come back to you with a range of segments that are relevant for that brief. And you then can just very easily buy that at scale. The next solution I want to talk to is streaming ad insertion. So this is something which Spotify's developed. It's really important that this gets talked about in a bit of depth, because it's the first time ever that you can actually understand if someone did start and listen to your podcast ad. For the first time, you can get a confirmed ad impression, you can get completion rate reporting, and you can, of course, get, because it's on Spotify and happening via Spotify, all the great first-party data and audience metrics you would typically get from a Spotify campaign. This is an exclusive to Spotify piece of ad tech, and it's available across all of our original and exclusive inventory. It's an opportunity to get a deeper integration into the podcasts that we work with. We've got a range of podcasts, obviously, that speak to different audiences. But I think the most exciting part about streaming ad insertion is really, as I've mentioned, the additional reporting, the additional metrics that you get back. So dynamic ad insertion, which is the current industry standard, you don't necessarily get back ad delivery. You get reach and frequency. With streaming ad insertion, you get confirmed ad impressions, you get reach, you get frequency, you get audience insights, and you get completion rate, creative performance, which is obviously very important as we move towards ensuring attention is something that's playing a key role in any campaigns that we're running. And what's really exciting about streaming ad insertion is that, if you look at the evolution of how ads get into podcasts, streaming ad insertion is an ad experience that we've built and developed. And it basically means that because it's an ad experience that happens in the Spotify app, we've been able to innovate on top of that experience. And we're now actually able to deliver formats that are very unique and for the first time ever allow for things like interactivity to play a role in podcast advertising. So call to action cards were introduced into the Australian market a few weeks ago now. What's really guided the insight and the development of this product is, firstly, people who are listening to podcast ads on Spotify, listening to podcasts on Spotify are going to be receptive to podcast ads. But as I mentioned earlier, they're also most likely to hear that ad when they've got their phone in their pocket or their jacket or their bag. What the great thing about call to action cards is that whenever you next go back into the Spotify app to that particular podcast or episode page, the call to action card will be sitting there and you'll be able to take the action that we want as advertisers to have that listener take. So it's really exciting. I'm going to play a short video for you now that does a bit more of a deeper dive on the product and what it's all about.
Introducing Call to Action Cards, a new way for advertisers to connect with podcast listeners only on Spotify. Cta Cards include eye-catching visuals, customizable text to deliver a clear, simple message, and clickable buttons so listeners can engage with your ad in a whole new way. Cta Cards are powered by streaming ad insertion and appear while your ad is playing, and later on while your listener is exploring the Spotify app. CTA Cards take your campaign further by resurfacing your message to listeners who previously heard your podcast ad, making it easier for listeners to remember and interact with ads they hear. Plus, you'll gain deeper insights on campaign performance with reporting and measurement based on confirmed ad impressions, made possible by streaming ad insertion. CTA Cards are a powerful way to drive better resonance and better engagement for your brand, taking your podcast ads to a whole new level. CTA Cards. Get started today, only on Spotify.
So that video explained a bit about the product itself. What this slide really talks to, though, is showing you visually what they look like in the app when the listener goes in and sees them. If there's multiple advertisers targeting a podcast, then they just stack nicely on top of each other. I think the key points with this product to really emphasize is, firstly, this product is a value add product that advertisers get access to whenever they book a campaign with Spotify utilizing streaming ad insertion. They last for up to 7 days, so it's a really great opportunity to continue to engage with that listener in an environment that Kate's already talked about. Typically, you wouldn't have been able to because we're talking to a premium subscriber. And I guess the really cool part about them as well is they can point out to anywhere you want the listener to go. It could be to a website, it could be to an app, it could be deep linking to an Instagram page or a profile at Twitter, Pinterest, wherever you name it. Don't limit your imagination in terms of where you'd like the listener to go. But the really cool thing is it is literally open to wherever you want to point them. So it's a really big opportunity. We're pretty excited. There's been quite a big take up of these products from FMCG/CPG brands in particular, who just look at using this product now as table stakes. So we're pretty excited to be able to bring it to this market. And if you've got any questions on this product at all, please let us know. And then certainly, I think obviously one thing that's really important to talk to is this idea of measurement. So there's probably a lot of people on this call that are familiar with pod sites. You may have used it. You may have worked with other publishers. You may have even worked with me when I was in my role at Wsj using it. But Spotify acquired pod sites in March of 2022, so this year. We've acquired it, but it's remaining open and independent for people to continue to use and work with any publisher that you want, who's open to signing up to it, of course. The really cool thing about pod sites, if you're not aware of what it does, firstly, it provides agencies and advertisers with a transparent third-party dashboard for you to be able to log in and see, as a very baseline, reach and frequency reporting and delivery reporting of your campaign from the publisher you're working with. But the really exciting part about pod sites is their pixel technology. So they've developed a pixel that can be implemented on a website, a campaign landing page, an app. And what it does is it actually matches ad exposure for a podcast ad and that listener then going on to that particular site or app. And for the first time ever, you can get conversion reporting for podcasts. So you can understand how effective is the channel been at delivering the outcomes that you overarchingly want from a campaign with working with an advertiser. So it's very exciting. And if you've got any questions on pod sites at any point, please let us know. And I think it's really important that, as part of that pod sites piece, that we measure and test our own products, which we've done in the US. We've seen that the Spotify and Audience Network in particular has delivered some really great outcomes for brands over and above pod sites benchmarks. Certainly, I feel pretty confident that we're going to be able to deliver the same here. And we're very open to working with anyone who'd be keen to, even just have a starting point conversation about pod sites and their advertising partner potentially using it. So thanks very much, guys, for listening so far to my section. Just to quickly recap on the How is Spotify Reinventing podcast advertising piece. We've built the Spotify Audience Network. It's a game-changing marketplace for advertisers to be able to buy audiences at scale. We've developed streaming ad insertion, which is this new standard for podcast advertising. You can get a confirmed ad impression completion rate for the first time ever in terms of the reporting you get back. We've developed call to action cards, interactivity for the first time ever in podcast ads. You can have your card will last up to 7 days, so that listener can take the action we want them to take. And then pod sites, so the ability to measure and understand how effective a podcast as a channel for your client. And now moving into a part that's really important in the sense, a part of the overarching podcast ecosystem and process, which is important to make all of those products really hum, which is creative. So podcast creative is incredibly important. It's one of the most intimate media that people consume. It's often just them and their headphones and the host of the show. We've done a lot of research into creative and creative formats. What we've found is that voice talent reads that are a bit shorter in terms of length, 30 seconds, are great for driving upper funnel awareness and extending the reach of a campaign. So utilizing the Spotify audience network, for example. And then host talent reads are great for introducing new brands, new products, or new services. So you heard the guys doing a read for Booty, bamboo underwear, as part of the day in the life of. So a unique product that we felt best to use the host to introduce. And of course, hosts, you're leveraging that relationship of trust that exists between the listener and the host as well. We're also pretty excited to share, we're now able to do embedded clip reads for advertisers in this market. So this is where you might want to have some audio from maybe some video that the client's developed or produced. Could be a trailer, or it could be a clip. Maybe it could be an overarching brand identity, a sonic brand identity you want to have as part of any creative that runs. Embedded clips are now available to be able to address that need. We'll share through as part of a follow-up some creative examples that really talk to how these are best utilized. I think really the exciting thing from my perspective when it comes to podcasts and comes to audio is that audio is really a blank canvas in the sense that it's a cost-effective medium when you talk about producing content. When you're talking about producing creative. We've developed some best practices for podcast advertising specifically, which we'll share with you guys as, again, part of a follow-up. But I think it's just really important that if you are potentially you're working with a client who's about to start on their journey in terms of podcast advertising, or even if you've got a client who's currently doing podcast ads and they maybe want to look at reimagining or refreshing their creative, we've got this brilliant team of experts at Spotify Studios. We've made creative for hundreds of brands and advertisers, and we're very much here to help and very happy to set up a phone call or a consultation session with anyone to be able to go through and look at the creative you're running and how could that be optimized. And so I think really key practice or best practices when it comes to creative, as I said, voice talent. So really about that sort of shorter, sharper, awareness-based messaging. Host talent, it's for that, emphasizing that advocacy style messaging, having the host trusted relationship with the listener leveraged. Make sure you're using a checklist that will supply that's best practice. So you're following best practice about when to introduce your brand and all sorts of things like that. And then, as I said, we're a resource. Please use us as one. We've got a team of experts that are here to help. So if you've got any questions, just ask us. Okay, so